So next, we need to define a template that we can use. Think of the template as an item that holds your schema. So we have your environments, you have your source environment and your target environment. You're going to need to make a workflow that acts on those two environments. It'll pull from the source and write to the target anything you want to write, like passwords, objects, object attributes. But to get what attributes you want to sync across, like the password last set attribute, source anchors, a lot of things, you have to create a template. Template is what the workflow uses to have a base schema of the synchronization. So we're going to go to the pancake menu and we're going to hit templates under setup. So to repeat, you've done your two environments. Next is templates. And just like your 5-minute video link that shows you how to do building blocks, this is exactly what we're doing. We're going to make a new template and you just give it a name and descriptions. S3 to T3 is a great description. It tells you which tenant to which tenant. And you can say full schema. Or you could say only new users or things like that. But we're going to do full. That can do add and update. So we'll say next. And then it's attributes are different in M365 versus in Active Directory. A great example of that is first name is first name attribute in the cloud, while in Active Directory, due to old standards, it's called given name. So it's given name in the local template, it's first name in the cloud template. We need the local template since we installed the agents, so we're going to choose local so we can get all the Active Directory full attribute labels. Same with local. We're going AD to AD, but we're using the cloud to do it. That way you don't need direct connectivity over WAN. So we're going to create new users as is. We have 5 users in the source that we're going to create in the target. Right now, we're just going to do the defaults. So as is. And if we update those users, we'll enable them. If we match users, we'll just do enable on it. And then if target addresses exist, that's an exchange feature. You can choose overwrite once if, or do not overwrite at all. A lot of times other projects are involved that are at their own schedules, so we go with do not overwrite. So go ahead and choose do not overwrite if one exists as a target proxy, a target address for forwarding purposes. Next. This is the same thing but for groups. We're going to literally leave it all the defaults as is right now. And some of you are used to our on-premise Directory Sync Pro product line. Kind of looks like a familiar screen to you. Next. So for contacts, we're not creating any contacts. We're just going to leave all the defaults, or to be on the safe side, since we're not going to create contacts, say do not create, disable, disable. This is your fail-safe on this template. Maybe in another template where you plan to do contact synchronization, you enable it. So you can make multiple templates. Now, this is important. We want devices because we are talking about migration Active Directory. So we're going to say as is, enable, and enable. So we're going to leave the defaults enabled because we are talking about an Active Directory migration and devices will be involved. This is the default password. You have to put something in here. So we can put in anything that meets the source and target policies. If it's 12 characters, make sure it's 12 characters here. If it's 8 characters, like it is in this environment, you're fine with 8 characters. This won't tell you it's complex enough, but you'll get an error in your first sync, and you'll know. If at every next step, your organization might also log you out every 5 minutes. So luckily, as long as you hit next, you can get back to the same place, to the last screen. Okay, so we do want to synchronize the history in this template since we set that up from source to target. And directional, you don't decide in the template, you decide after in the workflow. So here you go. If you wanted to get more advanced and you wanted to remove attributes from this list, you could do that here, or add custom ones like source anchor or MS consensus CGOID and others. You would do that here. And this is also the area you would make advanced transformation formulas. Like maybe you want to change UPN from Mike at company.com to mike.kilnani at company.com. You would do that under the advanced section of this area. And, you know, for later discussion, but out of scope at the moment of this project setup. So we'll just leave it as is, 16 pages worth of attributes. These are those given names, first names, etc. This is your Active Directory attributes. I'm going to click Next, and it's going to give you a summary of your template. Remember, you can always come back later and update these templates, and then the next time you sync with that template, it'll show those updates in your sync. So 157 mappings. We're going to hit Finish. Sounds about right, of a standard Active Directory. And there you go. Now you have a template. We can just hit the Directory Sync logo up top and get back to that main level. And now you can see we have one last thing to do. You have a template ready with schema information. You have 2 environments ready. Now you can make a directional workflow sync. So go ahead and hit New. And this might be a little long, so you want to be descriptive. There's a lot in here. Obviously, you can come back and rename it a little bit after you figure out what's in there and change some things up. But I already know what I want to do. I want to do a one-way sync, so I'll just say S3 to T3 user and group. User group and device sync. So I remember us choosing device in there. We just didn't choose contacts. There you go. And this could be anything. One way. Two-way is available, but we can talk about that in the advanced area. And now it's asking you environments you need in the sync. You always need 2, right? And you only have 2, so you just choose them both by clicking them once. They're not highlighted right now. You have to actually click and click. So these are the 2 environments. And now we're going to choose the one way, or you can import your own. We're going to go one way. Remember, 2 ways available, but it's more complex to think about password syncs 2-way also, since we're doing that in here. And then now, every workflow always needs to read and match. If we think about it, even if you were doing a read workflow and you're not going to write anything, you still need to read and match both environments, because at every run of a workflow, conditions could have changed from the last run. Maybe 2 new employees joined the company. So you always want to read and match every single time you make any workflow. So that's why we've already put in read and match as steps for you. You just have to select what you're going to read and match. You need at least 2 things to read, because you can't match on one environment. You need 2. So there you go. We're going to read from both. And that's a workflow. Then you go to match. And match is going to read from source. Now, match can be in the other direction too, but we're going one way right now. So source, and then in the target environment, you put in target tenant. And now you choose the attribute you want to match on. You know, the object in the source atom needs to match on the object in the target if they exist. And what attribute would you look at? In our case, we can do a simple user principal name. However, if you choose user principal name and this profile does groups, groups don't have user principal name. So you must make sure you add another filter that groups would have. Also, devices don't have user principal names. Since you're doing a combo profile of user, groups, and devices, it is a good idea to keep adding multiples. So my suggestion would be go with SAM account name first. And so you can just back out of that and just start typing S. Actually, dropped it down first and then type in S. Drop that list down, and there it is, 3rd one in the list. You got it. And then match against SAM account name or whatever other in your environment. Now, some environments can be different, but here we're simple to simple. SAM account name, SAM account name. Now add another attribute. You can add up to 5 attributes to match against. Now, this is an OR scenario. If it matches on the first, it's never going to check the second. It's stop after first match. So it's not an and, it's an or. So the second parameter we want to choose is common name, because groups can be matched on common names like HR to HR group. So you definitely want common name in there because it's actually called CN for short. So you just look for CN. There you go. And just start typing CN. There you go. And then a third parameter you would want. By the way, the CN works with devices too, so that's why we're choosing it. A third parameter you'll want is that UPN. So just in case if they don't match on the other two because of some special things going on, like many customers rename their common names of groups to something else, some long ID, and that's possible. So by having these three universal parameters, and I notice I didn't choose mail because mail is another fourth good parameter to use. Generally, I'll say SAM account name, mail, CN, and user principal name. But since we're dealing with Active Directory migrations, mail isn't the most important one. Does it hurt to still add it? Sure, you can add it to the bottom of the list. So go ahead and add attribute and do mail for the email address as a matching parameter, right? In an AD migration, it's not the most important thing, but there it is, second one in the list, mail. And if you needed to get more complex, you can have another pair, which would open another box, but we don't want to do that. But you can get you can have expression clauses, and you can say, here's my first 4 attributes to match against. If it still doesn't find it, I can say an or statement and add another pair of another 4. And another pair. You can also do and statements, but you'd have to hit the add another pair button, and then you'll see a second box open up, and you can have an expressional relationship between the first box and the second box of an and or an or relationship. So you can say both boxes must match with an and then you can count that as a match. So you can get very complex in the system, unlike the other versions and releases of the product where you only had 3 attributes and I'm talking about Power 365. Here you can have 4 attributes per expression, and then you can have multiple expressions. So it can get very large. We'll stay simple right now and just hit OK. All right, so we have a read and a match. And then on the left, I haven't talked about the left. These are the templates, right? You can actually drag and drop, like if you go highlight, delete objects, and try to drag it over, it's a drag and drop interface, and you can place it anywhere in the series, right? And you can get rid of it too by hitting the X on the right. We're not going to delete anything right now, so we're getting rid of it. But you get the idea. We have all these templates. You can run PowerShell scripts when it's a local environment. You can drop a PowerShell after reading and matching if you want to run something else that isn't in the system and you want to run it with the agent you installed. You can run PowerShell scripts. You can't run PowerShell scripts in cloud directly, but you can if you installed agents. So that's what that is about, but we're not going to do that. We're going to stay simple. So read, match, and then stage is the next option. So we're going to go scrolling down to the third gray box saying staged, stage data. So you've read all your users. The database, the cloud database has all your users in it. 400 in the source, 300 in target. You have 700 users. You matched them against each other, and you found maybe 40 matches. That's what you're operating on, those 40, when you go to stage data. So when you say select on stage data, this is where the template applies. You have to select the template you made. So you might have refreshed on you. Try again. And then since there's only one template, it's easy. You could have multiples. And we're going to say next. And this is just a one-way template. And now you don't want to choose both. This is actually asking you what is the direction you want to move forward in. So you want to choose source. And then hit next, not both of them. And then now choose the target, and the source will be dimmed out because you already chose it elsewhere. So now you're saying one way from source to target. It is now also going to ask your custom domain suffix, which is lab, starts with a lab because this is the O365 ready suffix. So it'll be the second one in the list or the third one in the list. The first one is not valid. It's another alternate UPN. So, when you make the users in the target, do you want to have your custom domain suffix on it? If so, then you choose the middle one. If you don't want it and you just want the AD's local suffix on it, you could choose the third one. But we're going with custom because we're building this for the cloud. So AADC will sync it up properly. And now it wants to know that source organizational unit. And if you go over to your source environment in LOD, we'll point out what it's talking about. So if you look in the ADUC in the source, you'll find you have the ADUC up open right there in the middle. These are the users we created when you set up your demo tenants. And Adam, Becky, Matt, Mike, and one other, 5 of them were synced up to the cloud. That's the OU it's looking for to sync from, the agent is. So now you can go back to that browser and point it to P365DS student 1 as the OU. So we're scoping the AADC sync. And this is a way of gating things. You're not going to see these, and this is a great point to now cancel out and show why we need to make one more step before we can do a workflow. The reason you don't see any OUs is because you have to set them up in the environment after the environment is discovered. If you remember from the videos, we put all the agents down, and I said it would discover the environments. It's done discovering the environments, but now we have to go back to those environments and set up organizational units as LDAP filters, basically. So I'm going to hit environments from the pancake menu. We'll come back to the workflow. And source, we're going to define in its settings. There's a settings button way to the right. And we're going to define organizational units in here. If you're used to Dursing Pro, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It kind of looks like that. And what you put in here is the only thing available in the workflow. So you can just check that main level box, and then everything below there would be available and nothing else. This is also a way of putting security gate right at the environment, saying the customer has told me, do not go anywhere else in my environment but this OU. So it's a gate. And you set this gate inside the environment filter so the sync can never see anything beyond this scope. And that's the idea here. It'll only see this OU and any other OUs you would choose. We're only going to choose that, and we're going to choose one more called staging at the bottom. The reason we do that is just in case customers like to not put new objects directly in the AADC scope. You put it in staging, and then you drag it over once you've inspected those objects. So we need to show those two. So we've already built a container called staging for you. There you go. So that's the only two you really want to see, unless customer tells you there's another set of OUs you want to be able to read from for another domain or a domain tree or another trust or something. So this is that flexibility in here. Also, you can set filters there, which is the next section under organizational units, if you don't like doing organizational unit strategy. And this is an important area for 2 reasons. One, you don't want to bring over well-known objects. Or do you? And if they fall in your container, then you want to think about that. If they don't fall in our container, well-known objects are in the main container. So we're just going to leave it alone. Now, the main thing here I want to point out is devices is being checked. Because we're doing an AD migration, that box needs to be checked as a gate, or there's no devices that are going to be read to come across. And then you're not going to see your Windows 10 station being read across to be able to be worked on as a object in the other application. This is the directory sync application, and once we move to the other application, you'll see that why it was important. So we're leaving that checked. We know we're not doing context. We could kind of uncheck context, but what if there was another template we were doing context in? There's only one of these environment profiles. This is the main global profile for the source. So you should just leave it checked if you're going to have plans to do contacts later. You can always come back and change these later. Passwords is the next area. You want to make sure passwords are checked because you do want to bring them across. And notice, currently, they're not checked, but you would have to choose a password server. And in an environment, you can install up to 5 agent servers. We only installed 1. So the only one you can choose will be in that menu if you drop it down, SS1. Remember I said when you install the agent, you can call it source tenant agent, but when it finishes the install, it'll rename it to what it really is, the host name of the box. And it did that. And then you wouldn't check that box if you're doing a one-way password sync. That's to get a password sync from other environments called password write back. So we're going to leave that alone and hit save to this environment settings down on the bottom right. And we refresh, so we have to do it again. Drop that none to SS1, and then go to organization units. It's still there because it saves. And then filters, we didn't change anything, we're good, save. All right, we have to do the exact same thing to target because there's no OUs in the target either to find. So you'll want to go to environments and choose the target tenant and say settings. And then add OU. And then similarly, the target environment has a container called P3RDS students where you would choose that and staging. Those are the two, right? Because when we run this sync in the workflow, we're actually going to write the staging, not to the main OU, because the main OU is being synced up every 15 minutes to Office 365 using the AAD connect. So most customers don't want you to drop uninspected objects by some tool in the main container. They want you to drop it in staging so they can be inspected by Active Directory administrators, say, okay, this is good to go. Then they will drag it to where they need to in the sync process to Office 365. And that's the idea behind having at least a staging container. And of course, once we make an object, we're about to make 5 objects in this workflow coming up. Once we make an object, you can move the object around anywhere you want. We have a tracking of it at that point. This is about creating new objects when you're talking about the staging container. Okay, save that. And now the discovery normally runs every so often, and this environment was already discovered, so no need to do it again. The reason you know it was discovered is if you click the logo, you'll see back at the main level by hitting the directory sync logo up top, you'll see it actually says somewhere online, and I'm sure it ran a discovery. The reason I know why is you had OUs. When you were picking your OUs, you wouldn't have been able to pick them in the environments if the environment wasn't discovered one time. It would have been blank to even pick them as a gate. So looks like it's good. We're going back to now the workflow, which we had to jump out of to do this. And so you'll have to kind of scroll through the wizard again if it doesn't take you back to the same area. Go ahead and hit settings. And it's now showing you in an edit mode, and you were at the sync workflow. You had already set the environments. This is where you were, the drag and drop screen. Wizard versus edit mode look a little different. You have to do these if you hadn't already, and it must have not saved them, so we have to do all this stuff again because we jumped out. So SAM account name. You know, in complex environments, you are allowed to cross them. SAM account name could match up against some extension attribute if you didn't want to do it exactly to SAM account name or an employee ID or something. And then common name, CN. And then that optional mail attribute. It can come in handy if you're trying to do contact objects, for example, or distribution groups. All right, hit OK to that. Now we're back to stage data. where we had to take a detour for a minute. Now we choose the template and source and target. Next will be OU selection. So now they should be available in here. Only the ones you've scoped. So you want to read from there because that's where your 10, 17 objects are and the 5 users are in there that you need. So you want to read from that, not the staging. And you can include also OUs down there, so you don't have to worry about it. It's checked. And next. So now it's asking you a default OU for newly created objects. This means for the target environment. There we go. That refresh hit us again, so we're going back to stage data. Select that. So this is the staging container. You're going to want to do this one into staging under, yeah, there you go, because you're writing now to the target. And then staging, just staging, that's fine. You don't need to define, because we have one profile doing it all. So just stay at that level, as long as it's outside of AADC scope. And then you have to do it for groups and context and devices. So technically you could have chose groups under groups, right? But if you want a one consistent place to put them, instead of buried deep, you could just choose staging, or you could choose the actual level and categorize them. Your choice there. And do it again on the devices. Didn't take. All right, and then do the first one, because you don't want to create any source hierarchy. And there you go. Hit finish before your refresh takes over, and you'll be able to save this long template. Okay, we got one more thing to do, which is the fourth option, which is write the data. So you've staged it, it's in memory. Now you got to write it to a target active directory. So you choose the tenant you want to write to. And that could be local in this case, and that's what we chose. There we go. Something's still missing. There, now do it. Oh, yes, they disappeared again. So read from both. And then that one. You can just take this out of the recording. I would just do 2 for now, and then come back and add more, just so the save gets in. Because 5 minutes will go by otherwise. Good, now go back. This is ridiculous, but this is real. This happens to me too. In the binary tree environment, during live classes, I'd be like, every 5 minutes, my security credentials would, because I have high security credentials. So do you, because you have all those multiple orgs and on-demand. So I know exactly why it's doing it. So one way to avoid this in the future is to do a new session of the browser, because what's happening is we drag this tab out of another session. So that thing's trying to log you in like to 14 other tabs. And that's what's throwing you off over here. So if you do a private browser window when you do this, then it'll make that session separate and give you more than 5 minutes. All right, so it looks like you need to go to match objects and finish that off, right? Oh, you did. Okay, never mind. All right, you're saved. Okay. So recorder's still going, right? All right. Big noise for you to find the break. All right, so continuing from here, once your workflow is saved, you can schedule the workflow by going to the Schedule tab. And right now we're leaving it manual because you should never schedule the first workflow. You should try it first, see how it does. And then alerts, you can also send yourself alerts once you're in schedule mode, and you can add email addresses to it to get daily alerts on your workflows if you're running it once a day, or in this case, we're running every 24 minutes. And I think it's every 24 hours right now on the schedule. So you could get once a day alerts, knowing when your workflows are failing, so you can go fix that for the environment of your client or your internal work. So we'll back out of this level, or just hit the logo up top to get back. The idea now is, what we've done is we've created the 3 major components needed to run a synchronization of our users from the source to the target using those agents. So the next step is that run button with the workflow you have highlighted. And let's see what it does. So we'll cut the recorder at this point and